trustees and all that that entails. Before that, we talked about the concept of citizenship and what dual citizenship means. And then on that note, before we get started tonight, Bauman, I wanted to tell you, to remind you, and this is in part an announcement, that on Friday, May the 2nd, at the University of Toronto, American Citizens Abroad will be running a full-day conference, and I believe this is the first conference of its type anywhere in the world on the whole concept of citizenship-based taxation. And this is of extreme interest for all of those people affected by the latest Harper initiative, that is signing with the Internal Revenue Service of the United States the intergovernmental agreement vis-a-vis FATCA. But once again, that is Friday, May the 2nd, 2014, 8:30, University of Toronto, St. Michael's College, Alumni Hall, 121 St. Joseph Street. It will feature a debate between the two leading scholars in the area of citizenship-based taxation, plus a presentation by lawyers and investment advisors on where and how American citizens in Canada will go from here in terms of their retirement planning. But that said,
and you are talking about those Canadian citizens who used to be or are dual citizens.
Absolutely, those Canadian citizens who have what they now refer to as that clinging United States citizenship that many of them are awakening to. Some didn't even know they had it, and they're dealing with it in their own way. But it is interesting how the reality of United States citizenship does foreclose a number of retirement planning opportunities for them. But on to the here and now. Great privilege tonight. We've got some very interesting and exciting guests. Don't know who to introduce first. Okay, I've been informed we will begin tonight with the Honorable Sinclair Stevens, who has a most distinguished career as a lawyer, politician, businessman, currently the leader of the Progressive Canadian Party. And actually, I've been encouraging him to either write his autobiography or allow his biography to be written, because believe me, the Sinclair Stevens story is the story of Canada in the 20th century.
Absolutely.
And we're very lucky to have him here with us this evening and get some of his thoughts on that. And secondly, but by no means a distant second, we have tonight Archbishop Dorian Baxter, who is the president of the Canadian Progressive Party, Anglican priest, the man who was the first successfully litigated against the Children's Aid Society, I believe, and a man who I've never suggested that he should have a biography or autobiography. In his case, I believe the movie Dorian will be coming out sometime in the near future, and I hope to have a cameo role in it at the very least.
Yes, for sure,
Absolutely. Role in it. But we're here to talk, of course, about the political climate and elections, and you know, we have a federal election coming up in the not too distant future in 2015. And Sinclair, what are your thoughts on the electoral landscape, the election landscape at the moment? Do you think the Conservative Party has a chance of remaining in office?
Oh, I certainly do. Apparently, there's a current poll out indicating that Harper has pulled up into the lead over Trudeau. Now, that may be a bad thing, because if people see him getting some strength, there's tremendous animosity to Harper. They may say, if there is a sporting chance that he's going to be re-elected, let's start doing something about it to stop it. The most unforgivable thing that I have seen in my over 50 years of being active in the political arena is what he is doing with Bill C-33, the so-called Fair Elections Act.
You say so-called.
Well, if you read it, it is a complete power grab in which he is anticipating that in the next election, if he can have that type of if you like, system to determine who actually has the right to vote and who doesn't have the right to vote, I think that is not democracy. And our party has come out with a press release stating that they feel whatever is going to evolve, be it C-23 or any amendment to the Elections Act, it shouldn't be applicable in the coming election. It should be 2 elections away, and then you would find that Harper cannot, if you like, exploit the situation that he has created, such as the C-23. The reason I think we in the Progressive Canadian Party are so sensitive, and certainly I'm so sensitive, we have gone through a very nasty takeover on the part of Harper with our old Progressive Canadian Party. The Progressive Conservative Party was something that went right back to Sir John A. Macdonald. The first person to use the term progressive conservative was Sir John A. Macdonald in 1864.
It's interesting that the phrase is progressive conservative.
Yes.
So we have the adjective in front of conservative, which makes it very different from the concept from the Conservative Party of today.
Oh, very much. And you know, there seems to be an ebbing and flowing in economic history between people who are in the money game, the banks and the wealthy people, get excess money. At the time of Theodore Roosevelt, for example, he campaigned against the distortion in the monetary system as far as the Americans were concerned, and it eventually led into the Great Depression of the late 1920s, and it took us many years. In fact, it wasn't until the Second World War that we really found our way out of that depression that had occurred from those that had too much money acting in a very irresponsible way. Now, unfortunately, it's happened again.
Now, when you say irresponsible way, what do you mean? Would that include, for example, you know, if too much money is in the hands of too few, I presume that that would remove it from general use in the economy for others?
That's right. And in an ideal working economy, is money is earned and spent to recirculate. But once you get a situation of where billions, if not trillions of dollars is under the control of various people who have no interest in spending it for the sake of reviving the economy, that's where the danger starts.
You know, I just had an interesting mental sort of pictorial image of that. Would that be sort of, you know, the flow of a river that all of a sudden gets dammed up, and, you know, that flow of water stops and it's just sort of there and not flowing to the general use anymore?
I've never thought of that as a parallel, but I can see in many ways it is a parallel, in that ideally, like the whole idea of the monetary system is that you earn dollars either through work, or you have some invention, or you do something to earn dollars with a view to spending that money, and the whole thing keeps circulating. But once you have excess accumulation in the hands of, in this instance, about 1% of the total people, it literally means the people who should keep the economy rolling don't have the money to do it. It's taken off the table.
It sort of chokes off the circulation of money.
Yes. Now, the unfortunate thing, and this brings me back to what happens during an election, is in the United States, money has got the overpowering say. It's an unbelievable. I was reading last week a story about a chap who used to follow the Senate in the United States on the basis that he would identify what the various senators were advocating, and in turn, hopefully they would implement it in a constructive way. his point now, and he's actually running to be elected to the Congress of the United States, he says what has happened is money has become so important in the political game and getting reelected. These people don't have the time to spend on really putting legislation in place that is needed. Monday and Friday, he said, is entirely taken up by soliciting funds for their re-election. Well, this is absolutely daft. This has nothing to do with democracy. Its money has been, if you like, idolized to the point that it is dominating the system as opposed to the normal political process, allowing people to vote as they see fit and hopefully constructively.
If I can interject just for a minute there, you know, the Honourable Sinclair Stevens has been leading us valiantly ever since 2003. One of the things, Sinclair, that you said, and of course I can see it again in what you're saying now, that is so poignant, and I hope the people out there that are hearing this will realize Sinclair put his finger on the fact that since the Harper regime has managed to get a chokehold on the Canadian way of life and on the real meaning of Canadian democracy, what he has done effectively, and is still doing, is changing the political ways in Canada, and we no longer have a democracy. I believe we would call it a moneyocracy. Would you comment on that further, Sinclair?
In many ways, that is correct. Like, just think of the robocall concept. Somebody in the political arena 50 or 100 years ago, I think, would never have dreamt of it being proper to use technology to phone people, as they were doing in the robocall situation, to influence their eventual vote. It's fantastic when you think of it, that there hasn't been a more active prosecution of the people that were responsible for that. Now, one of the reasons that I'm, I suppose, so alert to the danger of C-33, this draft legislation that Harper is trying to get through, is we lived through, and Dorian lived through, the takeover of the old Progressive Conservative Party by Stephen Harper in the most underhanded way. Like in sport, they just call it foul, 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 and he'd be in the penalty box. But in the instance that I'm referring to, you'll recall Harper realized that with the old Reform Party that he was trying to make a national party, he couldn't do it without an alliance with somebody like the Progressive Conservative Party. He approached the Conservatives and said, can't we talk about an amalgamation, getting together and whatnot? And I can remember at an Edmonton conference, the question was put to a vote. And the idea was that those that wished to thwart Harper came up with the creed 301. In other words, we are going to field a candidate in each of the 301 ridings from coast to coast. And in Edmonton, there was a resolution put before the meeting, the convention, so that we'd be on record as saying the 300, at that time, 301 ridings are to have a Progressive Conservative candidate in any riding. Indirectly, what you're saying is no way do we merge with some of the Harperite ridings in any of the 301. I remember at the convention, I was getting ready to speak, you know, let's vote for this and stop Harper with his approach. And John Crosby, who was a great fellow, came walking in, and he said, "What's going on?" And I said, "Well, are you going to speak on this 301 resolution?" He said, "Well, in what way?" I said, it's what our future depends on." "Oh," he says, "is that right?" I can still remember he got into the line, you know,
For voting.
For voting, no, for speaking.
Well, for speaking. Yeah.
Speaking, and by the time they reached him, I can remember him saying, "I did not come 3,000 miles to Edmonton to see the demise of the Progressive Conservative Party." He got a standing ovation, and it went through. Now, the reason I go back that far as the party was concerned, the feeling was that was the end of it. We've passed a national approved resolution saying no to 301 in the sense that we won't field a candidate in every riding. McKay at that time spoke very vehemently about how it was so good. And I can remember reading the committee proceedings when the then amendment to the Canada Elections Act was going through. And I could show you, if I had it here, where McKay speaks during the committee meeting approving the new act, the new Elections Act, which permitted for the first time a merger of two political parties. Now, this is often forgotten. Up until then, you couldn't merge with another political party, and that is why none of them came together. What you would have to do is surrender your charter and advise your members, go vote Liberal or CCF or something like that. But this bill that I'm referring to allowed parties to merge for the first time in our history. And McKay is on record of saying it'll be a first. Of course, I will never be a person that will stand idly by and see our party merged. Well, you know what happened.
May I ask a question, because you brought a very interesting history of the election and apparently this process of the freedom to vote even was not practiced at that time inside the party, let alone outside of the party. But at that time, if I remember correctly, liberals were on they had majority in 2003. How did they come about to make that kind of the amendment into the Election Act?
Oh no, this was before 2003. This was, I think, in the year 2000 or 2001. And the Liberals were in power, and they were passing this legislation amending the Canada Elections Act, which included the right to merge between two parties.
Okay.
And all I'm referring to, what happened on December the 3rd, 2003, could never have happened without that amendment.
If we didn't have that amendment.
And there was McKay at committee, and he didn't have to say this, saying, of course, he would never utilize it to merge. And as you know, he signed a declaration at the convention in 2003 of the Progressive Conservative Party, saying he would never tolerate, if elected leader of the party, a merger with the Harper group. But he reneged on it, and I think.
And how do you, either you or Dorian, how do you compare the events of that time with the C-23 that is going on right now? Isn't it the habit of the present conservative government that every year before election start to amend this Elections Act just before election? Because the same thing happened in 2007.
If I could just piggyback, on what the Honourable Sinclair Stevens has brought up. You see, I think personally that if Canadians everywhere were able to understand totally what the Honourable Sinclair Stevens has explained to us, the shocking realization is that thanks to the betrayal of Peter MacKay, we ended up with a situation where this party was conceived in deceit, this current Conservative Party, the Harper regime, conceived in deceit and born in betrayal. Now, you know, the Honourable Sinclair Stevens was the first one to see this and courageously went forward, launched a legal action challenging this, won it. I have a 42-page judgment, and the Honourable Sinclair Stevens has the original. I have a copy. And in it, Justice Elizabeth Hennigan clearly repudiates Peter MacKay, Stephen Harper, and of course Kingsley himself at the time. Because what they did, and she found this, she found that they willfully violated the provisions of the Canada Elections Act. As the Honourable Sinclair Stevens pointed out, if you did this in a sports arena, you'd be disqualified. And in actual fact, they did not wait. In fact, I'd like, Sinclair, if you could just speak about how they did not even wait the 30 days. If you could just elaborate on that. It is shocking.
Yes, in the Canada Elections Act, there's a provision that if there is a merger, you have to wait 30 days before it becomes effective. Now, the reason for that is to make sure that there's nothing underway, that an election hasn't been called, or that there's some, if you like, obstacle.
Overlooked or something like that.
Yeah. What happened was the actual vote of the progressive conservatives and the Harperites, as we call them, was on a Saturday, December the 3rd.
7th, I believe. Was it?
Well,
oh no, you're right. The 3rd,
I think it was the 3rd.
Yeah.
And we had our challenge to the merger ready to go on Monday. But much to our surprise, if my wife was here, she can still remember it, the morning news on Sunday stated that the merger between these two parties had been approved by Kingsley, the chief electoral officer,
At that time.
on Sunday.
Did the news come out before the actual merger?
Yes. I phoned on Monday and got a hold of the chap in charge of the legal side of Elections Canada and said, what on earth gives? Is there a precedent when a chief electoral officer would come out on a Sunday to okay something as important as this? He said, oh yes, the Manitoba flood. Now, likening the joining of two political parties to a flood is unbelievable. But in that instance, MacKay and Harper had the chief, Kingsley, the chief electoral officer, eating out of his hand. He told them how to merge. Our lawyer was telling us at the same time, oh, you mustn't go to the chief electoral officer. That'd be like going to a judge during a trial, and you can't interfere like that. But as far as Kingsley was concerned, he facilitated that merger on a Sunday. When we went in with our papers all ready to challenge the thing, they said too late.
30 days is gone.
They ignored the 30 days.
Oh, they totally ignored that.
It's already done. We didn't wait 30 days.
Can I ask a follow-up? Because you touch on a subject that I am pretty sure every single Canadian, especially those who were disappointed of the whole political system and they don't even vote anymore. You have been MP, you have been a cabinet minister, you have been in the government, and you have had all shebang of the all experience in the different levels of the government. Is there any way that we can either stop, prevent, or successfully prosecute this kind of the misconduct by any government Doesn't matter it's progressive, conservative, doesn't matter is a small party, doesn't matter is liberal or NDP for that matter. But after all these paper shuffling that we do and all of this tax money being spent for this legislature, we are so handicapped that we cannot stop this kind of misconduct and corruption in any level?
I think it's a result of our basic system, which is quite, over the years, has been demonstrated as quite effective. And that is the government is supreme. Their supremacy comes in effect from the Queen, the Governor General,
and the Prime
signs
Minister.
whatever the legislation is. It's not like the American system where they have a House of Representatives, they have a Senate, they have a President. They're all in their own right powerful. Whereas once you become Prime Minister, if you have a majority in the British system, the system that we inherited, the Prime Minister is an extremely powerful person, because as long as he can keep his House of Commons majority, if he has the majority, in line, he pretty well
Is a czar.
Is like a dictator.
Yeah.
He says this is the way it's going to be, and if you object or even argue against it, you're often just fired. You're out of the caucus.
You're out of the party.
Out of the party, yes. Now this is dangerous when you have a situation such as we have today with C-32. The Harper, if he sticks to his guns, will override any opposition to the way he wants the bill to eventually be enforced. Now, the thing that may happen is that there will be a court action where I know of 3 groups that are considering going to the eventually Supreme Court of Canada and say this is defeating democracy. A person who only has 25% of the total Canadian vote technically has a majority in the House of Commons.
18% precisely.
Well, as far as the actual vote is concerned, he's got about 38%.
Yes, but 18% only sitting in there as an MP.
That's right. Now, he packed the Senate so that he has enough senators now that'll do his job. It's the most serious threat to the Canadian democracy since Confederation.
Okay, so I mean, I agree with you, but to generalize the principles here, even in a majority government, the government of Canada is subject to the rules of democracy
Law.
and the basic constitution. It seems to me that in the case of the Fair Elections Act, that no government ought to be allowed to change the rules of elections to favor itself. That would seem to me to be, absolutely clearly outside any notion of any democracy, much less a Westminster democracy. What's interesting is that what's allowing this is the extent to which the political parties have become ingrained in the system. I mean, he could never get away with this if he couldn't force the whole Conservative caucus to vote with him. So, I mean, that's one aspect of it. But we seem with Prime Minister Harper to have a general disregard not only for the Constitution but for the law in general. And we see, fortunately, his being rebuked consistently by the Supreme Court. We see this, for example, in his attempt to appoint a non-Quebec judge to the Supreme Court. We see this in other ways that are not quite as obvious. The Supreme Court striking down minimum sentencing laws and things like that. So as I guess I would make 2 points. The first is that no matter how powerful a government is or how powerful a prime minister is, it still must work within the framework of the basic Westminster system.
But the difficulty, John, that I see and the Honourable Sinclair Stevens has alluded to this, for some reason we have a situation as Canadians, we are called to stand on guard for this nation. The Honourable Sinclair Stevens has done that, you know, by bringing the various suits and even considering what he's going to do possibly about the C-33. But the issue that I feel that really I cannot understand how or why Stephen Harper and his regime are able to duck and dodge every single. There's a litany of violations of the. If you go back to the proroguing of Parliament twice in a row, it's unheard of. You don't manipulate the Governor General the way he has done that. And to go even further, the in and out scam. That was an he was caught red-handed with the in and out scam, and that is still not resolved. Then we find that the horror of horrors, that he is the first leader of a Western nation to be found guilty of contempt of Parliament. If you look into that, the minimum, and he of course is big on minimum mandatory sentencing. The minimum mandatory sentence for that is 9 years. He should be in there for the last 3 years, checking out the inside of these super prisons that he's planning to build in conjunction with his, being willing to. When George Bush said to Stephen Harper, "Jump," Stephen Harper said, "How high?" And so I just cannot understand. You know, I read about the Council of Canadians with Maud Barlow. These people are right on track with their concerns, and yet nobody has any teeth. Why has he not been charged by the RCMP? Look at the Mike Duffy situation. I mean, unbelievable. 1 minute, like Brazeau was his big buddy, and guess what? You know where Brazeau is today. When people and look at is it Nigel Wright that is taking
the check?
This is a gentleman and a scholar par excellence, a loyal member. Guess what he did? It is only in my, because it's not over till it's over.
But Dorian, these are the baby. This is politics, and we know when, especially when we are in the power, inside a powerful party like main three extreme parties, they always this kind of the battles and the backstabbings in the history of mankind. You go back from the Romans, they did the same thing. I thought as an ordinary person with the limited capacity of the intellect, I thought after 2,500 years of the governing and different form of the democracy, different form of the rule of law that we are all trying to obey, it must be a mechanism. But the way that Sinclair told me right now, which I always mention that on air and off the air, that we are very close to the state of dictatorship and tyranny. Any solution? Do you have any recommendation that at least can be introduced to put in place to either prevent again or stop future takeover of a few people of the whole country?
Before I give a direct answer on that, let me elaborate a bit on what you say. You refer to the Romans. Where are the Romans today?
Exactly. Of course. The whole republic came down.
That's right. And I think the signs that you have that I'm referring to in Ottawa are very ominous in that context, because we referred to the in and out. Well, now just analyze how unbelievable the in and out was. The law said that they were limited to, I think it was $20 million of exposure in spending during an election. In other words, you
2011 you're talking about.
Sorry?
You're talking about 2011.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
Harper is one of those people who believes the end justifies the means.
Oh.
And in order to get around the ceiling, he had his people make a special deal with various ridings where they would send money to the riding. The riding would buy the advertising that they were wanting to have on a national scale, and the riding, of course, had to refund the money then.
Riding association, you mean?
The association.
Okay, to the candidate and take it from candidate back to the... Okay.
That's right.
Yes.
Well, now what happened? They wrote it out legally. They were convicted. They paid a penalty of $50,000.
Not bad for having a government. It's a good
as far
price.
as Harper is concerned, I
was a good deal.
He's still laughing over that. That he got what he was after was the added advertising, the penalty.
You know that you can get $50,000 unsecured loan from any bank, even if you don't have a job. Let alone forming a government.
Was pretty nominal. So I'm giving you that as an illustration of where if you do not observe the law, but you find these little loopholes that you think you can, for the time being, win the day, that's Harper.
And is there any remedy? Any suggestion, I mean, if you can come
Well, the immediate remedy that I'm suggesting for this dilemma with C-23,
Yeah.
whatever eventually is passed, it not be effective in the coming election. That it be
timeline, they put a timeline.
It will be the one after that, and at least Harper won't have the immediate advantage. And in whoever is in government at that time, they may come to their senses and realize this should not be a part of democracy, the type of provision that he has in there.
But as you said, they didn't even keep their own words for 30 days, let alone keep it for another 4 years.
That's right.
Well, they're just going to do what they deem necessary.
But coming back to Bill C-23, the shocking thing is, we don't just have this, sort of build up to what is in fact another scam, whichever way you look at it, but it's being palmed off to the Canadian public as something they're doing to protect Canada's democratic rights. It is shocking. To the average Canadian, they're thinking, oh my goodness, he's doing such a clever thing because now, only people that are really identified will be... They don't realize that you peel back the layers of the onion and you have tyranny. And it's stark and it is absolutely raving. It is tyranny on a level that I have to concur with the Honourable Sinclair Stevens, has not placed our democratic system under more jeopardy since Confederation. I mean, this is unbelievable. It is unconscionable that a leader of this nation would be able to somehow say one thing and be doing exactly the opposite. The fact that this man is willing to do what he does to the Canadian Constitution. We said it before, way back in 2003. Sir John A. Macdonald, we're proud to say, is the father of Confederation. Stephen Harper, from the day that he got into this unbelievable milieu, the way he has done, has been and is one who is lusting after the title to be the father of deconfederation. We cannot allow it. Canadians must stand on guard for the greatest nation, the greatest democracy that has ever been institutionalized. It is Canadian democracy that is being assaulted on a level never before imagined. And thank God we have the voice of our honorable leader, Sinclair Stevens. Thank God we have people standing behind him. But you know what? We need the rest of all of Canada needs to rise up and stand on guard for this nation before Stephen Harper is able to literally destroy everything that our beloved Sir John A. Macdonald stood for.
So that brings me to this question from both of you. What is the plan of your party for the next election?
Could you repeat the question? question?
Yes, because you mentioned that we have to stand guard and it needs all help from all Canadians from all walks of life. Either you're a voter or volunteer or candidate or a party for that matter. And since you are the leader and president of a original progressive party, what do you have your plan for the 2015 election?
Yes, the type of thing that we want to stress is the part of Canada that's being ignored by the present government, the Harper government. The type of thing that we feel has got to be reinforced is our education system. Like, if we want to have a growing younger population that is well educated, that can compete in today's world, I think we will find it'll be surprising how much better we can do as far as the progress in Canada is concerned. I'll come back to some other things, but the point I want to drive there is that is a real contrast to Harper's approach. Like, when he got into power, the average, the corporate taxation was about 23%. It's now down to 15%.
Yes.
That is costing billions of dollars of lost revenue as far as Ottawa is concerned.
Which reflects to other services.
That's right. Now, in the United States, there's still over 30% taxation of corporations. Now, the only reason that Harper reduced it down to 15% was money. He has a constituency among the corporate world
Mainly
that
West.
is paying off for him. They're sitting on the money, and I don't know whether you've taken a look at the amount of cash sitting in corporations and banks at the present time, while there's a shortage on so many different items, such as on teaching. A second area that I feel there can be a very much better job done on is transit. Like, the more I listen to the Toronto debate about tramways and transit and buses and
For the last 30 years almost.
That's
yes.
right.
But for reasons I don't understand, the railways are not put into effective service. Like, as far as the trains service that we have, I, in my first election, advocated that the trackage that ran through Aurora, which was part of the riding I was running in, should be activated. I remember the local press did a picture of me standing wide-legged between the tracks with the weeds growing up to my belly button.
And what year was that?
That was in '72.
So it is we are a little bit slow to make decisions.
It's slow, it's unbelievable, because the secret to better transportation
Community
is transit. The trackage is there. I walk by various railway trackages. They're just empty. There's nothing there. Like, for example, 400 highway. I was in on the planning that was originally agreed upon for 400 highway. The reason it's so wide, that was to be for transit.
For train, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
North and south.
Which never materialized.
But the car industry has such a lobby that they're always, as they've done in Los Angeles, they've always won the day, build more roads because we want to manufacture cars so that people can be driving their cars. And I don't know whether you've been in Los Angeles lately and seen the traffic, eh?
So it is a lack of foresight from the members of the governing government.
That's right.
And it never changes. Doesn't matter, because we had 13 years of liberals and they didn't do nothing about it.
No, and I think the reason that Harper has taken the attitude that he has taken is he is mainly doing what he thinks is in the best interest of business.
His business.
Yes. He is very influenced by what is good for the West, especially Alberta.
Yeah, of course.
And that is where you find such an emphasis on the pipelines to take...
Maybe to the BC as well as the south of the border.
That's right.
But you see, you mentioned...
No, what we're wanting to do in answer to your question is come up with issues that are very meaningful for the people that are voters. Like if we can say we'll educate your children better than they're being educated because we'll make more resources available. We'll help you get to work easier with the transit approach. One of the things that we feel has been lost sight of is the Commonwealth.
Mm-hmm.
The Commonwealth is one of the fastest growing groups in the world. There are 54 nations in it. We're one of those nations.
Mm-hmm.
We have less trade
with members of the Commonwealth
than any other Commonwealth country. Now that can be reversed almost overnight. When I'm in London and I talk to some trade people in London, England, they'll often, of their own volition, come up with the question, why is it so hard to do business in Canada?
It's cheaper with China.
Yes. Now,
not cheaper in the sense of the cheaper for the nation. I mean, it's cheaper for the government in power.
I don't know what's wrong with Harper. Like, I can remember he went down to Panama and signed a treaty with Panama. I scratched my head a little and I asked the Library of Parliament to give me some statistics about Panama. It turns out they're heavily in debt. They're mainly borrowing from the Americans, and that's where they have most of their trade.
So what is the plus?
I don't know. Both ends of the Panama Canal are now owned by the Chinese. You know, the clearance...
it used to be American.
It used to be American.
Yeah.
Like, to me, if you develop the Arctic and do more to encourage transportation through the Arctic, it's a third easier for an Asian country to go over to Europe through the Arctic in distance than
like
it is.
Suez Canal in Europe and North Africa.
But we unfortunately are stuck with this fellow called Stephen Harper, who was able to decredit his opposition to the point that he got elected. And people foolishly said, yeah, but if we're going to elect you, what are you going to do? Without realizing he's in the palm of the hands of the corporate world.
So he's just a salesman for the oil industry. Or executioner, executioner for the oil industry.
He's very influenced, I think, what's good for the oil.
Still, for me, it boggles my mind to see in a country like Canada, with 147, 148 years of the history, and constantly progressing, at least I see in the society, mentally, intellectually, and so on, with all rules and regulation that is piling up. Just look at the Gazette in Ottawa every day.
Yeah.
You need 10 people to read just one day.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we are unable to stop one man or one group of the men, a small group of men, to rule 33 million people.
That's right.
You know, just dovetailing though with the Honourable Sinclair Stevens' very, very powerful pointing out that, you know, we as members of the Commonwealth hold not only the opportunity for 54 countries who have already got similar legal systems, you know, similar banking systems, similar measurements, but we also are the only country in the world, that has access to the Francophone Commonwealth. 17 more nations. We're not doing anything with that either. And so coming back to your question, which was I mean, the Honorable Sinclair Stevens has worked diligently. And if you look at one of the things I'm really grateful for, he is now moving into the cutting edge of social media. We have had the biscuit with the regular media. I can't believe it. One of our main problems is the monopolizing of the media by corporate structures. Like, we don't have a free press anymore, because guess what? There are edicts being issued as to what can and what can't be published. Metroland owns, it's a huge conglomerate. And you know what? We're in a when we won that case, when the Honorable Sinclair Stevens has a judgment, 42 pages, finding that Peter MacKay, Stephen Harper, and Kingsley, all three of them, willfully violated the provisions of the Canada election. That should have been the front page of every newspaper. It was on page 28, just in front of the obituaries.
Dorian,
and it was
that
3
hasn't
lines.
changed. Last year you ran as a candidate in Toronto Centre in by-election.
Yes, yes.
How much of the exposure of the media did you manage to get?
Nothing at all. And that's why the Honourable Sinclair Stevens has run out of patience with I mean, we have run out as a party. We are now moving into the area of social media on a level that we've never done before. And I will say, coming back to your original question, what are we doing? Well, we are poised. And the big thrust here, as the Honourable Sinclair Stevens pointed out, is education. I am sure Canadians taking time to listen to this are waking up. We started with a very significant statement by John Richardson, our moderator, our co-moderator, who pointed out that Stephen Harper has lost a golden opportunity to stand up to the tyranny of the IRS. You know, he made a very important comment about FATCA. FATCA, in fact, in my view, when Stephen Harper and his cohorts capitulated to the IRS, it effectively has compromised Canadian sovereignty. It is like the War of 1812 all over again, but it's now 202 years later, and guess what? They, in my view, have irrevocably violated Canadian sovereignty in this act. Now, most Canadians, how did he do it? I heard it on the radio. It was one of his omnibus bills, just slipped in there. And this, to me, is a serious issue. I am grateful the Honourable Sinclair Stevens, as our leader, is doing something about it. He is now working towards the social media on a level we've never done before, and we are bypassing. And let me tell you, once I get elected, and it's going to happen very soon, I can tell you that, once we start electing members of the real Progressive Conservative Party, the Progressive Canadian Party, they will have no choice but to interview us. When we start getting landslide victories, which I believe will happen, because Canadians are historically tolerant people, but they will not tolerate tyranny for too long. The day is coming, and soon is, when we are going to see a peaceful Canadian revolution, and I believe the leaders of that revolution will be the progressive Canadians, because we are so proud. Everybody's proud to be a Canadian, but who could be prouder than a person that is willing to stand up and say, I am a progressive Canadian? The Honourable Sinclair Stevens pointed out just about an hour ago, it was Sir John A. Macdonald in 1854 who coined the phrase, we must be progressive conservatives. Sadly, the Harper regime, the first thing they did was to remove the word progressive. As Canadians, we must rise up. We must recognize this party, this regime, should not be called the conservative. They should be called the regressive Conservative Party, because they have done nothing but cause us to go backwards. And as I say, in conclusion, I am grateful that the Honourable Sinclair Stevens, in his leadership, every Sunday we have these conference calls. We are moving strongly to the most important area. If our fellow Canadians are not aware of this, how can they do anything? So we are moving for awareness on a level that has not been seen before, and I believe we are going to see results.
And I hope you do. And because you said this, it reminds me of a quote that I want to just add to what you said, because it says Pastor Martin Niemöller, if I am pronouncing it right, Niemöller, who was arrested in Germany in 1930s. It was way long before Second World War. It was before social credit get to the power.
But it did.
It
The
wrote,
point is, it was before the war.
yeah, before the war. It was
Describing
long.
the situation that led to the war.
And wrote at least a variation, or at least a variation of his article is, first they came for the socialists and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionist and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me and there was no one left to speak for me.
Yes.
And that reflects what you just said and John said regarding a FATCA or similar issues, because people are under this impression that because it does not directly affect me, but they don't know that it is just one step further to get to your category.
My hope is, you know, and we are grateful, I'm grateful you brought the Honourable Sinclair Stevens as our leader, myself as the current
We are
president.
honored to have you
Well,
guys
thank you.
here.
And I would say this, those that are watching this, and I hope and pray there will be at least 30 million Canadians who will watch this program in the near future. And I'm going
More
to
than that,
ask,
come on.
yeah, I'm asking for all
All
of you,
United States.
yes, to rise up with us. It is time for us to stand up to tyranny. We cannot allow all of the work of the amazing Sir John A. Macdonald to be suddenly shredded and thrown away on the whim of one man who does not even care. I remember reading on the 24th of May 1994, when this Stephen Harper was in fact the president of the National Citizens Coalition. What did he say, Canadians? He said, as long as I can put a firewall around my beloved Alberta, he said, I don't care if there are 3 candidates, I don't care if there are 7 candidates, and I couldn't care less if there are 10. Meaning the breakup of Confederate. We must stand on guard, we must listen, and I hope and pray that you will go to our website, www.progressivecanadian.com.ca.org, and you know what? We need you. You know those old pictures of Lord Kitchener, your country needs you. Your country needs you now to declare yourself not only a Canadian, but a progressive Canadian. And I will thank you in advance, and I know the Honourable Sinclair Stevens will too. We will stand on guard for the greatest nation that has ever been able to raise its head. We cannot allow this tyrannical assault from a party conceived in deceit, born in betrayal. Rise up, Canadians, and let us do what is good and right. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said it is always the right time to do what is right. It is now that time, and the time now is kairos, is the Greek word. This is the critical moment, and I do thank you, gentlemen, so much for the opportunity of being here with the Honourable Sinclair Stevens, who has been and is a beacon of light for all of democracy in this nation.
I couldn't end the program better than that.
Well, then, no, I could not, and therefore I think that we probably should end it, subject to one small point. You know, all you really have to do to end this is for the people who didn't vote in the last election to get
Just
out
vote.
and vote.
Yeah.
You know,
Just simple vote.
There's so many people who stay home.
Well, I am grateful that, you know, you have made a promise to get this out by tomorrow to 30 million Canadians, and this should
No,
solve
more
it.
than
Not by, it takes by Friday, but we
I hate the way he minimizes things.
no, he just bring our expectation. He wants to put us to work hard.
Right.
And any last word, Sinclair,
Yes,
before we go off there?
very much endorsing what Dorian has said, but what I wish the Canadian public were aware of is the tremendous opportunity that Canada has to capitalize on the Commonwealth.
Amen.
I was in power with Prime Minister Mulroney when he did the free trade agreement
In 1986, 87.
in that area. What we don't seem to realize, it's only half done. Because we could make an arrangement with the 2 billion people that are in the British Commonwealth, because United Kingdom has opted for Europe. So it gives us an opportunity to come in there,
And get whole package.
get the whole package, We have trading rights with the United States, so between the United States and the British, the Commonwealth of Nations, we would have almost 50% of the world's production capacity at our beck and call. Canada is the most uniquely positioned country in the world to take advantage of this.
And yet we are not that ambitious.
I don't know what the problem is.
We are, but the leadership is not. The leadership is myopic.
No, I'm talking about the perspective of leadership. Yeah. No, not a individual Canadian.
This leadership is myopic. It is not a leadership. It is content to manage and to just...
It's a management. It's not a leadership.
Exactly. Yeah. We need leadership. Leadership is dynamic. Leadership is innovative. And it is time that we had a country that was experiencing leadership once more. Nobody since Sir John A. Macdonald has ever embodied the vision of that man the way it should have been continued. And for Stephen Harper to suggest that this party, which in fact is the Canadian Reform Alliance Party in disguise, it took them 6 months to realize that the acronym for that was CRAP. And then they finally took out the R and called themselves CAP. But let me tell you, they have not fooled most Canadians. They are nothing other than the Canadian Reform Alliance Party, CRAP, and that's why we continue to get that. And the key for us now is to say enough is enough, and to move forward and to immediately restore confidence in true leadership. The leadership that was ignited by the founder, the first Prime Minister of Canada, Sir John A. Macdonald, who had a vision. And we need that vision restored. And I believe personally, nobody is positioned better than the Honourable Sinclair Stevens, who in fact, in my view, is the one who is able to see what's happened and is able to guide us over these terrible days and to bring us to where we should be. And I am so grateful that we've had this opportunity today, and I look forward to moving and advancing the cause of true Canadian democracy in this way.
That's perfect to close on this evening. I'm almost afraid to even say it's perfect to close on. Okay. That was so good, Dorian. So what can I say other than that both of you, thank you so much for coming here this evening. And
privilege.
Love to have you back.
Thank you very much indeed.
All right.
Thank you so from my side to accept our invitation. It was educational, informative, entertaining,
and motivational.
And motivational.
Pleased to hear.
And I just say goodbye to our audience, and please don't forget to participate, vote, volunteer, and become a candidate.
For the Progressive Canadian Party.
Absolutely.
Of course, you can add it there.
Good night.
Good night.